Casalelie, Lenwo, Rananim, Mogetin, greetings y hola, saludos. I am Carmen G. Cantor, the U.S. Ambassador to the Federated States of Micronesia, a country of 607 islands in the Pacific. Today, we're speaking with United States astronaut Jose M. Hernandez, who joins us as part of our recognition of the International Day of Human Spaceflight, celebrated since 2011. This special day, as noted on the United Nations webpage, recognizes each year at the international level the beginning of the space era for mankind. Astronaut Hernandez grew up in the United States as one of 4 children in a migrant farming family from Mexico. He learned to speak Spanish when he learned to speak English when he was 12 years old and received a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the University of the Pacific in 1984 and a master's degree in electrical and computer engineering from the University of California in Santa Barbara in 1986. Astronaut Hernandez was selected by NASA for the 19th class of the US astronauts in 2004. He became a flight engineer aboard Space Shuttle Discovery on STS-128 in 2009 to the International Space Station as part of a 14-day science mission. He is a sought-after motivational speaker. He's an author, a former university regent, and currently president and CEO of Tierra Luna Engineering. Thank you very much, Jose, for taking time to participate in this interview. We are very honored that you could join us. Your life story is very, very inspirational to everyone. Let's jump into some questions.
Absolutely. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Ambassador, for having me. And I want to send my greetings to everybody there in Micro-Indonesia. And hopefully I'll get the opportunity to visit them in person one day when you're still Ambassador. And we'll be there in person to talk to them and give them a nice motivational talk.
Thank you so much, Jose. Muchas gracias. Jose, can you please tell us about your journey from farm worker all the way to space, the final frontier? What or who inspire you?
Well, you know, I think to be able to appreciate that, you gotta also understand how my life came about, because my story really begins well before I was even born, Ambassador, because my parents come from central Mexico, a state called Michoacan, whereas if you were to balance Mexico at the center of mass, that's where Michoacan is at. It's in central Mexico. And my father, as a 15-year-old, out of economic necessity, had to go to the United States and work in agriculture. The only thing he knew how to work in, because he only has a 3rd grade education. But then he meets my mom in his hometown and marries her. And he brings her along this nomadic lifestyle. I call it nomadic lifestyle because they used to travel to California 9 months and then go back home to Mexico for 3 months. During those 9 months, they had 3 stops: Southern California, Central California, Northern California, because they were following the harvest of the crops. And then they would go home for 3 months. Well, the family comes along and during the marriage, and there's 4 of us. I'm the youngest of 4, and of course, you know, where you're born at depending on what month you were born in. So you had a 9 in 12 chances of being born in the United States, and a 3 in 12 chances being born in Mexico. 2 of us beat those odds, and we were born in California because we were born in peak harvest months. But I have a brother and a sister born in Mexico because they were born in the winter. And so that was our lifestyle, you know, and it wasn't until a 2nd grade teacher convinced my parents we needed to stay in one place that we made Northern California our home. And it was then, when I was a 10-year-old, Ambassador, that I got the opportunity to watch the very last Apollo mission. If you look at your history books, the Apollo mission was when the United States was sending a man to the surface of the moon. And I was lucky enough to watch the very last mission, Apollo 17. It was December 1972, and I was 10 years old. So now picture a 10-year-old migrant farm working kid holding on to a rabbit ear antenna TV for better reception. We had an old black and white console TV, vacuum tube technology, and there I was watching Gene Cernan walk on the moon. And I tell you, that's when it hit me. When I saw Gene Cernan walk on the moon, and I was able to go outside and see the moon almost full, it was nighttime, and then come back inside and hear Gene Cernan talk to Mission Control Houston, I said, wow, that's what I want to be. I want to be an astronaut. So in a roundabout way, that's how the dream was conceived of me wanting to be an astronaut.
That is incredible, Jose. I learned recently that Netflix will be making a film about your story, and I hear that the title is going to be A Million Miles Away. This is super exciting. What can you tell us about the movie?
Well, it's great because Netflix approached me and asked me if I was interested in telling my story. I've written several books, including my autobiography called Reaching for the Stars. I have a book for the middle reader called From Farm Worker to Astronaut, and then I have a children's book. And so they must have seen those books and said, "Hey, we want to tell your story on the screen, and would you be interested in us making a movie?" And you know, when I saw there was Netflix, it's a big production. Well, my whole purpose is I give motivational talks to inspire kids to reach their full potential. Don't be afraid to dream. Um, and to reach bigger masses, I wrote the books so that they can read them. But I think this is the ultimate stage, is having a movie written, because now you know millions of kids are going to be able to watch that movie. And I'm hoping they get inspired. I'm hoping they get inspired because, you know, one of the things that I always use is a recipe that my dad gave me to finish my story of what, you know, not only how the dream was conceived when I was 10 years old, but I told my dad that same night I wanted to be an astronaut. And my dad and mom only have a third grade education, and they're migrant farm workers. But my dad had the wisdom to sit me down in the kitchen table and made me justify why I wanted to be an astronaut. That same night, I saw astronaut Gene Cernan walk on the moon. And I just repeated everything that reporter that was covering the story said that night. I still remember his name, Walter Cronkite, who narrated that moonwalk. And I just told my dad that I just thought it was amazing that we as humans can send a man to the surface of the moon, 250,000 miles away. I was proud I remembered that number, and bring him back safe and sound. And my dad, you know, he must have saw the determination of a 10-year-old boy. And this is the power of parental empowerment, because the next thing he did is what changed my life. He did two things. The first thing he said is, "I think you can do it." And then the second thing he said is, "If you want to do it, you've got to follow this simple 5-ingredient recipe." And I told my dad, "What is that?" And he looked at me, "Very simple, mijo." He said, "First, define your goal. Second, recognize how far you are from it. Third, draw yourself a roadmap so you know how to get there. You got to know the way." I told him, "What's the fourth?" He said, "You're doing it already. Education. You got to go to college." Fifth and final, he pointed outside the kitchen window and said, "You know that effort you put out weekends and 7 days a week during the summer, picking fruits and vegetables along your siblings and your mom and dad?" I said, "Yeah." He pointed to my books on the kitchen table. He says, you put that effort there. So you mix that up, mijo, and that's the recipe to succeed." And I tell folks, I use that recipe every day of my life now, and it works. I would only add one more ingredient, and that's perseverance, because you can't give up on yourself. You got to believe in yourself. You got to improve yourself each time. Human tendency is to give up after failing once, twice. Very rare do people attempt things 3 times. Well, guess what? NASA rejected me not 3 times, not 4 times, 11 times. It wasn't until my 12th attempt that I finally got selected as part of the 19th class of astronauts. So it's this whole story is what Netflix is interested in telling in the movie that they're going to make. And so we're very excited. We're hoping to get Michael Peña, the actor, to play me. And so we'll see what happens.
You know, I was going to ask who's going to play you. That's an excellent choice. I really hope they can get him to do it. You know, this is the perfect segue for the next question that I have for you. You know, you're always encouraging kids not to give up. You talk about perseverance. The following question is a question from the Girl Scouts troop in Pompeii, Micronesia. You know, I told them we were going to have this conversation. This is what they said. What is the hardest thing about being an astronaut? What can you share with them about what was the hardest thing?
I think the hardest thing is that when you're in a place and you're different, you look different, you may speak English not perfect because you're bilingual, trilingual in my case, because я понимаю по-русски язык, I learned Russian. You sort of, you just the mere fact that you look different, you start doubting whether you belong there or not. And so in the United States, we call this the imposter syndrome. And so I always like to have frank discussions with kids about this subject because it's very important that they don't feel that way. And so the mechanisms that I use myself is I do a thorough review of my curriculum and I convince myself that yes, I belong there because I've done my homework, I've done the requirements and more to ensure that I would get selected. I mean, I didn't get selected. I didn't get selected my first time. It was 11 rejections. It wasn't until the 12th time. So I paid my dues and I kept improving myself year after year. So yes, I belong. So the most difficult is making sure that you don't feel that way about yourself and you build yourself up and say, yes, you do belong.
Thank you so much, Jose. So, Jose, can you share a fun anecdote from Space Shuttle mission STS-128, something that happened up there that you can tell us about?
Sure. Well, training, we got to train about 2 years before each mission. And for a 14-day mission, because they're so complex. But there's also simple tasks. There's simple things that you do that are easily done, but you still practice them ad nauseum and you repeat them. And it's to develop muscle memory. And I remember one of them, I'll give you a very simple example. One of them is to change cabin filter, air filter. Every 2 days, you got to change the filter, put a new one in. And it's very simple. You go to the toolbox, you get a Phillips screwdriver, you undo 4 screws, remove the panel, remove the dirty filter, put in a clean filter, put the screws back on. The screws are even such that they don't come off because they stay on, so you can't lose them. So it's pretty easy, right? 4 screws, anyone can do it. But we practice it. And I remember complaining about it to myself. I never dare complain to the trainers. Complaining to myself, oh God, we got to do this activity again. And it only takes 5 minutes, but you still go through the motion. It's in your timeline that you have to do. And so we got into space, and now we're floating in the cabin and everything. And I'm the first one who has to change the cabin filter. And so I said, okay, well, let me float myself over. Now I don't walk, I float to where the toolbox is, the tool drawer. Yep, here's the screwdriver, the Phillips screwdriver, just like training. Then I float over on top of the panel, and I'm hovering around the panel. I said 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, just like training. And so then I go in and I start unscrewing the first screw. Well, I'm an engineer, and you know about physics, the laws of physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's one of the laws of physics. And so if you torque yourself one direction, your body's going to torque the other way. And so all of a sudden, it's like, it's kind of impossible to undo a screw if you're floating. because you're not anchored to anything. And I kind of just looked around, kind of embarrassed, because I said, wow, this simple thing actually is not as easy as I thought. And then I looked around what is the floor and when we train, and there's gray tape, 2 strips of gray tape on the ground. And I said, I wonder what that is. And so I undid the tape, and there were foot loops. So you slip your feet underneath, but they don't teach you that in training because the trainers have never been up in space. And so they don't teach that point. You got to figure it out because some astronaut figured it out and put foot loops, but they tape them over and they don't pass that corporate knowledge to the trainers. So now the trainers, when they train, they don't tell you, and you got to relearn it. So that's a very simple anecdote that I say, hey, the simplest things in on 1G sometimes turn out to be the most difficult in 0G.
Jose, thank you for sharing that. What is your favorite science fiction novel, movie, or TV show?
I think I have to go with the original Star Trek series. In the late 60s, early 70s, I mean, that's another thing I was very passionate about, is watching Star Trek and William Shatner in the original series.
Yeah, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelly, yes, long live. I know, I'm a fan too. Jose, April 12th is known as International Day of Human Space Flight, the anniversary of the first human space flight by Yuri Gagarin from Russia. It was proclaimed at the 65th session of the United Nations General Assembly in 2011, a few days before the 50th anniversary of the flight. This is 10 years ago, so this year is going to be the 60th anniversary. Why is space exploration so important?
Well, I think there's various reasons why space exploration is important. First of all, it's just human tendency. Humans are explorers by nature. When Europe was considered the modern world, 250, 300 years ago, they explored. They thought the ocean was flat. I mean, the world was flat and the ocean falls off to the side, but people took the risk and explored, and they reached the Americas. Magellan circumvented the globe. They took high risks because by nature we're explorers, we're curious as humans. And so when you reach that next step of being able to go to space, well, we got to push the envelope because that's just a natural thing humans do. But at the same time, you got to realize that the fact that we push ourselves going into space means we push technologies, we push innovation, we push development of technologies. And then these technologies in exchange are commercialized for applications here on Earth to make our life simpler. One just has to look at the cell phone that we have. That's as a result, a lot of these components, a lot of these capabilities, wireless communication is as a result of space technologies. And now a lot of people always say, okay, especially when I go and speak in countries that don't have a space program. And they say, why should we invest in a space program when there's so much social need here on Earth, in the ground here? And I tell them, I'll tell you why. It's just because innovation and technology creates jobs. It creates higher paying jobs. There's a study out there that says for every dollar that the US government spends at NASA, they get $6 in tax revenue as a result of commercialization of technologies that originated at NASA. So that's a pretty good rate of return, if you ask me. And so that's what I'm saying, is that innovation, you're creating jobs, you're creating higher paying jobs, higher education jobs, and you're moving your economy at a higher level. And finally, the third thing is, we've got to face reality that, even though we try to be good stewards of our country, some countries just don't respect the environment. And there's going to come a point a time and a place when we're going to contaminate this planet to the point that it's going to become inhabitable. And I'm not saying that that's going to occur in 10 years, 100 years, or maybe not even 1,000 years, but eventually it's going to occur. We're going to run out of resources, natural resources, or we're going to contaminate the world to the point where human life can't coexist here. And so uh, we need to keep pushing the envelope of technology so that one day we can go and visit other planets such as Mars or out of the solar system, because we may need to look for another home. And I'm talking 5,000, 10,000 years from now, not in the near future. So I don't want to worry people, but wouldn't it be nice that they say, wow, back in the 2000s, they had the foresight to establish a nice foundation that we built upon to be able to reach the point where we can do intergalaxial space travel, if you will, and find other countries we can live in. So in a nutshell, that's why I believe space travel is very important.
Jose, if you had the opportunity, would you return to space?
Oh, in a heartbeat, in a heartbeat. The only reason why I retired from space was because when I returned from my first mission, they announced the retirement of the space shuttle fleet, the U.S. vehicles, and the next vehicle wasn't going to be in line or wasn't going to come online for another 10 years. And it's been 10 years and it's still not online. So the only way you can travel right now is with the Russians. And although I know Russian because I worked in the nuclear non-proliferation arena, I traveled to Russia 25 times over a period of 5 years. Uh, you know, I the commitment you make with going with the Russians is you got to train 3 years, where 80% of the training is in Russia. And I have 5 kids. The oldest was about 14, 15. The age very important where I think both parents need to be present. And it was the hardest decision of my life to leave NASA because I didn't want to, but I knew it was the right decision for my kids. And I'll tell you, right now, I have 3 of them already graduate college. The oldest is finishing up his PhD. He has 2 masters, a bachelor's, and finishing up his PhD in aerospace engineering. He's going to do a Martian analog mission in Utah. So he's already well on his way to following his dad's footsteps, even though I didn't push him to that. He wants to do that. And he's at Purdue University, a very prestigious school in aerospace engineering, where Neil Armstrong graduated from. That's why he went there. I have a daughter who graduated from Loyola Marymount, and she's in business, works for a vitamin company, and is a big social media influencer. TikTok is what she's at. And then I have another daughter who's working on her master's in data science and works for Hewlett Packard. And then I have 2 of them that are getting ready to go to college. So, we're pretty busy, but I think I made the right decision because it allowed me to sort of make sure that I just don't put the burden on my wife raising the kids. I think it's at this age so critical. Both of us need to be present, and I'm sure glad I did that.
Thank you so much, Jose. Family is always first,
Yes.
no matter what.
But now if the private company calls me and says, do you want to go to space? I would say giddy up in a heartbeat. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Jose, what can you tell us about your latest endeavor, Tierra Luna Cellars?
Yes. Thank you very much. Well, I've come full circle, Ambassador. I came full circle in the sense that when I came back home after leaving NASA, I came back where I was born and raised because my parents are here, my family is here, my wife's family is here. And so I wanted my kids to make sure they got reacquainted with grandma and grandpa and the uncles and aunts. And so we've had a great time. There was an opportunity for me to invest in buying a vineyard, 20-acre vineyard, not big, but big enough to keep me busy. And my father, that's my greatest joy, is that right now we've come full circle, that we still work in agriculture, but it's different now because now we own the property And my father gets on, he's 84, still strong, gets on a tractor, helps me in the vineyard and all that. And then now this is the first year that we're actually, instead of just selling all the grapes to a winemaker, we're actually making our own wine. And so we're going to be selling, if you go to tierralunacellars.com, we're going to be selling a white Sauvignon Blanc. We're going to be selling a red blend, which is a Merlot, Tempranillo, Syrah, and Petit Syrah blend. And then we're going to be selling another red, which is a Zinfandel. And so next week we bottle for the first time. And then in May, we start shipping our bottles, and we're so excited. It's a great project for myself that I'm doing along with my father and my kids.
Well, that's very exciting, and I hope to bring some of those bottles, when I enter Micronesia, so people in Micronesia can taste the wine from Tierra Luna Cellars.
Yes.
Jose, do you have anything else you would like to share with us? I learned last week that there is now an asteroid named after you. That is pretty exciting, pretty cool. Congratulations.
Yes.
Anything you want to say?
Yeah, we were pretty excited about that because NASA called us up and they said, "Hey, we're planning on naming an asteroid after you. Do you mind? Do we have your permission to do so?" I said, "Of course." I said, "I only have one requirement," and NASA said, "Uh-oh, what's that?" I said, "Just make sure it's not one that's heading our way. Make sure it's not a direct hit, because the last thing I want is that Jose Hernandez is going to strike Earth."
Yeah. That's pretty cool, Jose.
So,
Jose,
excited, honored.
It's been an honor for me to chat with you today about your work as an astronaut for NASA, as well as your many other accomplishments. As we say in Pompeii, Micronesia, Kalangan, gracias. Thank you for joining me today. This has been awesome.
You're welcome.
How do you say you know what? I don't know. It's Kalangang. I never hear anything back, but okay. I'll take that back. I'll contact you with the answer.
But you're welcome.
De nada in Spanish, right?
Exactly.
No, I hope you can visit the Federated States of Micronesia. I'll keep you posted. I would love to host you in the country and have the opportunity to have you talk to the children, to the kids in the country. Again, it's a beautiful country. I mentioned 607 islands. It's paradise, and I'm sure that they will love to see you and have you there. So muchas gracias. Okay. We'll be in touch soon, okay? Take care.
Right, thank you. Virtual hug, okay, Ambassador? Thank you very much. And a virtual hug to everybody allí in Micronesia. Saludos.
Thank you so much.